It's great to be here. I think I'm going to discuss this thing of PDIA. You actually heard a version of it when you spoke about the ode to common sense. So, Arby, thank you for priming it. It's actually a mouthful, and part of the reason why it's a mouthful is that we developed the work by the observation that a lot of countries were doing sexy, cool things that weren't really for them, but seemed like they were for them. So we decided we would identify a process that was what we think they should do, but we would give it a really unsexy, uncool name, so that nobody would actually develop it or apply it as a fashion, because it just you can't really say the fashionable thing is problem-driven iterative adaptation. But I'm going to describe this as a process that we use in different places. I'm going to describe today the way in which it's being used to promote economic diversification in Sri Lanka. Sujiwa is someone who is a really strong partner with us in this work and really has authorized us, has engaged with us a lot, and we've learned a lot. And I'm going to be speaking a lot less about us as the Harvard team, and I'm going to be speaking more about us as the teams in Sri Lanka who are working with us. But before we get there, how about playing a game? Everyone's been sitting for a long time this morning, so let's see if we can do something a little bit different. It's not going to be very embarrassing. It's not going to be very difficult, and it won't be very long. Is that okay with everybody? Yeah. So first thing I want to do is let's create a sense of us. Everyone has a number on their table, and we can't really develop any identity based on a number. So what I'd like you to do is think about your number equating with a country. So if you're at table 1, where's table 1? Where's table? You guys are Venezuela. And we want you to reflect. Where's Great Britain? Where's table 7? Table 7. You guys are Great Britain, so if you want to be Welsh, you can be Welsh, or you can be from Northern Ireland, wherever it is. So if everybody could have a look and see what their country is, and then I want you to now start getting into the spirit of being French or Albanian or whoever you may be. I don't think that anybody from the actual country is in these groups, so I think you're all going to have now develop a second nationality. 2 of us here. Very good. Where's the USA? Where's the USA? And the question is, would Donald Trump be happy with any of you being in the USA? I don't know. But so everybody know what their country is. Now, here is the second thing. Please, will you grab the Scrabble letters? So if everybody could you have Scrabble letters on your table. Leave other people's tables alone. You are individual, independent countries. If everybody could grab a couple of letters, I'd like it if everyone has at least one letter in their hand. These are your country's capabilities. This is your capability. You as individuals have got a capability. Remember, please, only your table. Okay. I see you are already talking about your capabilities. So folks, if I could have your attention, I've got a couple more slides before we actually go to the game. You guys are starting prematurely. You're very excited. That's wonderful. Using the Scrabble metaphor, these are your capabilities, okay? This is the source of your country's production and their value. Now, when I say go, not before that, I'd like you to think a little bit about creating words out of the letters. The words are the products that your country produces. Now, I don't want any acronyms. You have to create proper words. So does everyone hear that rule? Proper words, no acronyms. Each product has a combined value, which you know from Scrabble. And the GDP is the total value of all of the words that you can produce at your table. Everyone clear? Now, the winning country, yes?
Is it scored by letter or by the value of the letter?
It's scored by the value of the letter, okay? So the value, if you have an I, the I is worth 1. So wait, please, everybody. Shh, please. So there's 2 measures that we're going to look at to see who wins this game. The one is, what is the value of your GDP? Folks, sorry. You guys have started. Don't start. It's corruption. Okay. I want to know what is the value of your words, your full or your GDP, and the other one is we're going to look at the level of your unemployment. How many of the letters you didn't manage to employ. So, everybody ready? Okay, go. You have 4 minutes. Okay, if you guys can stop now, please. Okay, if you can stop now, please. And what I would like you to do, I am not going to audit your words. I'm going to trust you. But if you could please calculate the value of all of your words put together. Okay? For every table, calculate the value of all of your words. And also calculate what your unemployment rate is. How many letters did you not use? Okay, where's team 1? Are you guys ready? Okay, everybody, if you can sit down, please. Please. Okay, so what I've asked is if you can calculate the value of all the words put together, which is your country's GDP. Folks? And then if you can calculate the number of letters you haven't used, which is your unemployment rate. Okay, folks. Shh. Okay. Sajiwa, Sri Lanka needs to stop now. Team number 1, what is the value of your GDP? 17. And how many letters did you not use? 0. Wow. Where? And that's Venezuela. Ricardo, isn't it like a dream? Where's table number 2? What is your value or GDP? No, it can't be. Sorry? MTV is a word. No, it is not a word. It's an acronym, and I said no acronyms. No, it is not. What is your value, please? 0. I know because I set it up that way. They tried all sorts of things to make it so that it wouldn't be that way. What is your unemployment rate? How many letters have you not used? What percentage? 100%. Where's team number 3? Table number 3, what's your value? 57. What's your unemployment rate? Okay, folks. 0. Team number 4. Sorry?
30 points.
30 points unemployment? 0. 5. Team number 5. 7 unemployment? 5 of how many pieces? 12. So that's about 40%. Team number 6. What's your value? 36. Unemployment? 0. Wow, you guys are impressive. Team number 7. What's your value? 56. And your unemployment? 2. 2 out of how many?
27.
Oh, so that's what? About 8%. Team number 8. Where's 8? Is that you guys? What's your score? 42. And your unemployment? 7%. These are great economies, by the way, apart from number 2. We're going to have to find out from Priya and Fernando what went wrong in that country. Team number 9. $48. And unemployment? 2 out of about, so maybe about 10%. Team number 10. What? 157.
And you're not going to audit that?
Wow, that is a questionable figure. What is your unemployment rate? Sorry? And what is your country? Argentina. See, See, what happened is that it's the one table where there's two Argentines at the table. It's a strong sense of us. Wow. Team number 11. Oh, sorry. Team number 11. 42. Unemployment? 0. Wow. Team number 12. 95. Unemployment? 0. Wow. So, where is the United States? You guys are number 4. Isn't it great to kind of turn the tables on the world economic structure for just a few minutes, even if it's just Scrabble? So, here are our scores, and the winner is Argentina. For all of those from Argentina, maybe you want to take a picture over there and send it home and say, this is what could be if we actually kind of got our act together, right? So, an interesting, silly game. Now let's talk. So there's some countries here that are richer than others. We have Argentina. We have the next country has got 95. Who's that? Number 12. What? You guys are Canada. And then you have a really big fall off to 57, 56. Why were these ones so wealthy?
They have 3 times as many letters.
Okay, so one of the things is that they have more capabilities, right? So, you know, that's an unfair thing. Some places have more capabilities than others. It's a really simple observation. What else? What else? So the capabilities are the know-how, okay? But,
The rules.
well, what were the rules?
Well, we used the letters. We connected the letters. So
Yeah.
You can use the same letter twice.
Yeah, so you leveraged capabilities into 2 or 3 products, right? So I don't know how many other tables did that, but you could use the same letters as they are used in Scrabble, which is really, really smart, which is one of the reasons why we do things like economic zones, right? Because if you do an economic zone, the same road gets used for 3 or 4 industries at the same time, and they get to use some of their capabilities together. This is kind of how it works. What other know-how worked well at your tables? No, you couldn't trade, though. You see, so, you guys who traded, we'll have to have an investigation. This is a closed economy. It's a closed economy. So.
Getting lots of ideas from different people.
Right, so there's something about know-how of getting lots of ideas, because you may have lots of capabilities, but you have to put those capabilities together, right? So we think about a lot of countries that have a lot of capabilities, but people hide what their capabilities are. Their capabilities are not revealed, or you don't have really good word builders in the country to put those capabilities together. So you might have a lot of great capabilities, you might have a lot of potential words, but you don't have the know-how to put it together because you've got a coordination failure, or you don't have entrepreneurs who can see the new words, right? So, you know, these guys must have created a lot of interesting words, and they probably had some wordsmiths at the table. So it's one thing to have a lot of capabilities, you have to also be able to put them together. What other things could help countries get rich?
Using multiple languages.
That is so those guys used had some French words, etc., and you guys may have as well. So again, it gives the idea of complexity, right? So how open is your economy to using different languages? How well do you know different languages? Okay, important. These are important things to help you become wealthy. Now, what about the countries that did less well? So, country number 2, what country were you guys? Oh my goodness, it really, really works well for me, doesn't it? That wasn't actually by design. Sorry, Priyan. Who's number 5? Got 7 points. Where's number 5? Oh, the French. Why did you guys do so badly? And then who's number 1? Oh, you guys actually did really poorly. I was celebrating you, but before we actually had anyone to compare you with. Which is kind of like how the politics is in Venezuela, right? We're doing great until you look at everybody else around us. So let's not tell those stories. Why did you guys do so badly, Priyan?
So we
Yeah.
13 letters, but no capability, no vowels.
Right, so you had 13 letters. That's more letters than some of you guys. How many letters did you guys have, Ricardo? More than that. More than that. Not
30.
You guys had 30. Okay, so one thing is, so you guys had, whoops, you guys had 13 letters. So you didn't have nothing, but you didn't have as many as the others. Okay, but the key thing is you had no vowels. So imagine a world without vowels. Now the beautiful thing about Scrabble is that the vowels are the least valuable pieces. Every vowel is worth how much? One. So you kind of say, in the world economy, what do we want? We want surgeons. And we want brain surgeons. And we want rocket scientists. And hey, the guy who cleans the streets is the one who puts them together. So if you had M's, I gave you your letters, right? You had some nice letters. You had some valuable letters. Did you have some Q's?
We had 2 Q's.
I thought I gave you Q's. They're like worth 10 points, but they're worthless if they don't have the other vowels, right? So one of the things is that you guys didn't have many letters and you had no vowels, so therefore you couldn't write any words. So it's an interesting question for countries that you might have some letters, but if you don't have the way to put them together because you're missing key letters, you actually just end up with a large unemployment rate, which is a problem that many countries have. Why else are countries poor in this game? What else? So not enough letters, no vowels, imagination, maybe the ability to put something together. You guys tried, right? You guys tried. You tried MTV route. You tried then to steal from your neighbors, all sorts of things. I bet it doesn't really work. Tim?
We had an interesting dynamic in which one person wanted to maximize the number of letters used, so maximize employment. That was one policy objective, and another person wanted to maximize that the high-value letters got used first.
Yeah.
So somebody wanted to maximize value, and somebody wanted to maximize GDP, and somebody wanted to maximize employment, which came into conflict a little bit.
Yeah. So one of the things that does happen oftentimes is if you have that and you have you have a finite set of capabilities, and then you have a policy disagreement on how to use the capabilities, and you only have 4 minutes. Now, this is a realistic situation, right? You have to make a policy decision and say, how do we mobilize them? Are we going to create an industrial park? Are we going to create some kind of a hub for new entrepreneurs? Or are we going to just create one giant smelter and hope that everyone comes around the smelter? How are we going to do this industrial policy? That can impact what kinds of words you create, but it can also create a stalemate if you have disagreement. And we find that there's many countries where there's a lot of disagreement about how to do things. So these are good ideas about what goes wrong. This is one of the things that Ricardo in particular has spent a lot of time working with. We were hearing about how Colombia is dealing with this issue. And we've been working in Sri Lanka on precisely this issue, right? Is when you're a country that has capabilities, but you find that you can't seem to put those capabilities together in ways that show you clearly what your future is, you're in trouble, right? So it's not that you don't have letters, it's that you can't create words. Or the words that you have are words that are not necessarily going to take you into the future, which is the issue with having oil or having oil in Colombia or having coffee. We want something else. We want more complex products, something that has more value. Now, the common advice that we find from a lot of agencies when they come to a country like Sri Lanka is they would say, so you can't create those words, and what you really need to do is you need to improve your doing business indicator scores. Anybody heard of the doing business indicators? It's one of our kind of favorite bugbears here. It's an indicator set that says here are 13 or 14 things that you should do to make your economy more competitive. It's the same things for all the countries, no matter if they're different. Let's do that. Let's get more transparent. Let's improve our governance. Now, these things may be the things we need, and I think the example from Bunkeldex about taking best practices on governance indicators was a very good one of where the best practice addresses a specific problem that you have. And in that case, it's very, very well chosen. But if you think about it, if you want to take the Scrabble metaphor, if you have the World Bank come and say, what we want you to do is we want you to write the word doing business or the word transparency. How many tables could actually write that word now? Just have a look at your letters. Doing business. I don't think Venezuela can. Probably not the USA. So one of our points is, these things take their capabilities too. And actually, you go to countries that don't have the capabilities to put together into new products and to create business, and you say, here's a bunch of solutions that you should introduce, but those things actually are beyond the capabilities of many of the countries we work with. So we don't particularly like this approach. And it's not that the ideas are bad. The doing business indicators reward you if it's easy to start a business. That's not a bad idea. They reward you if it's easy to get the permits to build a warehouse. That's not a bad idea, right? It's just that many countries struggle with these things, and they spend a lot of time trying to do them when, in fact, they are not the things that they need to do. We find that oftentimes we go into countries and we'll say to them, what are you doing to help do business? And they say, we're going to do well on the doing business indicators. And then it becomes very apparent that, our first question is, what problem in your country does that solve? And they say, well, what do you mean? Say, well, do any firms have a problem with the things in the doing business indicators? And they say, we've never really thought about that before. So one of the things that happens is that you have an external solution that actually crowds out and disempowers the us. Because it's a solution that people say, well, it comes from the World Bank, it must be right. So I don't like it for that reason. The second thing that I don't like it is that they don't address the problems in most countries, which are just much more complex and very specific to contexts. So when we started doing the work in Albania, and Arby has left, the Albanian government a few years ago said, we want to grow one of our sectors. It was a sector called the façon sector, which is like a clothing sector, clothing and shoes, but it's a little more complicated. And the number one sector in Albania, and they needed it to grow, and it was in decline. And they didn't know why. So they said, will you come and help us? So I said, well, what are you doing to help the façon sector? So they said, well, we're trying to do better on the doing business indicators. And then the conversation was, does that have anything to do with the façon sector? And they said, well, why would it not? And we said, why don't we go to the façon firms and ask them what their problems are? And so we went to the façon firms, and they identified 42 things that were holding them back, and none of them had anything to do with the doing business indicators. And we found out that the problems were very Albanian specific. So one of the problems, for instance, was that they got material from Italy, and then they would process that material, and then they would export it back to Italy. But when they got the material for the clothes coming from Italy, it would go through a part of Albania, and the border was in an area that was very rainy. So they would find that oftentimes the truck would get wet, and all the merchandise would get wet, and when they paid the customs would be determined by the weight of the truck. So the firms were saying, can we do something about this, because we end up paying more than we should because it's wet? And the government said, well, we've never really heard about that before. We thought they would just complain about the customs rates, right? So you need to find out what the issue is, but because you have these solutions from other places, you can't necessarily work out that actually you're just missing some vowels. So what we think about is, how do we invade these complex problems that are context specific, and how do we find local solutions by empowering the people in the local place to find their own solution? See, the other thing we think about is, if you solve it once with an outside solution, you don't build the capability to solve the problem when it comes back to you again. So we have the Sri Lankan table with 0. And the solution for them isn't to write the word doing business indicators, because you can't. So there has to be some other strategy to think about solutions for you. Now, problem-driven iterative adaptation is the strategy that we have introduced. It's a process strategy. It is a mouthful, but it's actually just common sense. And I want to describe a little bit how we help countries think through this process, specifically in respect of the question, how do you go from 0 or from 17 to 50 or 60 or 100 in this game? I'm going to describe what PDIA is, how it works, and then I'm going to conclude with one slide which says why you should consider it for your country. So what is PDIA? PDIA is a process to build capabilities by us, for us, given who and where we are. Very important. We're in Sri Lanka and we're not trying to tell the Sri Lankans that they need to be German. Why? Because it's pointless. They're Sri Lankan, right? And it needs to be developed by them where they are with what they have. One of our assumptions with PDIA is that there are always more letters than we see. There are always more capabilities, and there is a challenge of leveraging the capabilities so that the capabilities can find the future. We do this while addressing complex problems that we don't know how to solve. Now, when Arby was describing the work that they're doing, he described the process that was very like PDIA. Let's identify a problem, let's get to action, let's act while we plan so that we actually learn and we get stuff done. The one difference between the work that he's doing and the work that we're doing is that the problems that we're addressing are problems that are really thorny, really, really difficult, really complex. This isn't like building a playground where you know what you need to do. The problem with economic development, the problem with diversification, whether you're in Saudi Arabia, whether you're in Venezuela, whether you're in Sri Lanka, is that we don't know how to do it. And how we know that is that all of these countries have had 5 or 6 5-year plans to try and do it, and they haven't succeeded. So you're dealing with a situation where you have a problem that is pressing on you, but you don't know what to do, and it's also in the spotlight, and it's politically sensitive, and you really need to have delivered on it last year. So what do you do? So how does PDIA work? The first thing, and this is the slide that I have lots of writing on, so I'll just read it through for you, is that we say these problems are problems that you need to get a lot of political authorization for. And when we had the session earlier where Robert Lawrence was asking the question, how do you deal with detractors and spoilers, etc., I thought what he was trying to get at also was the idea of how do you create an authentic message about what you're doing. Authorizers who are willing to stand up and say, we have a problem, we're really going to create what we call a holding environment in which you can solve that problem, are not a dime a dozen. And so you need to find them where they say, this is really politically thorny, it's been here for a long time, we're not going to pay lip service to it anymore, we're actually going to do something. They're the beginning. Now, a lot of people say, why do you have to work with political authorizers? Because most of our work is in governments, and governments are political and they're bureaucratic. So you don't mobilize people without getting somebody at the top with authority to mobilize them. Right, Sujiwa? Somebody has to be saying, march, or else they don't march. And it's not that they don't want to march, it's that they don't know if they're allowed to march. Right? So we start with authorizers who identify their problems. It's not us. And usually that'll happen in a meeting like this. Someone probably after the session will come to us and say, we have a problem in our country. Would you like to come work with us? Right, Ricardo? Or our exec ed programs. I think both Sri Lanka and Albania came out of executive education programs where people came after the program and said, we really have a big problem. The next thing is that they convene teams of the local us, their people. This is not about McKinsey, and it's not even about CID. It's about their people. And those people essentially will get together with facilitators, who we are, and they will start to engage with the problem. They start interrogating it. They start breaking it down. They start saying, why is this a problem? What is causing it? Why haven't we been able to solve it? What are the parts of it? And one of the reasons we do that is we find that these complex problems are so big and so scary that you can't solve them with one step. So one of the things we want to do is say, can we break them down into the 50, 60, 70 parts to them so that we can empower a starting point? Does that make sense to you? You break them down so you empower a starting point. When we started working in Albania in the Fason sector, one of the things that was so difficult and why the government wanted us there is they said, what we see is that the exports from the sector are going down. it's really, really bad news for us, and we don't know why. And we need a solution, but we don't know what the solution is. So the first thing is to say to them, you don't need the solution. Let's break it down and find out of that one problem, are there 42? And when they're 42, maybe we invade 3, or we invade 4, or we invade 6. We find entry points, and we break it up, and we build up our solution as we go. So the second thing is you interrogate the problems, then you identify practical ideas to act on quickly. And this is, I think, what Arby was speaking about. You want to move into action fast. We spend, in the workshops in places like Sri Lanka, we spend about 3 hours developing plans. And the plans are, where would you like to be in 6 months' time? And what are you going to do on Monday? That's it. And the teams say, what do you mean, what are we going to do on Monday? They say, well, what are you going to do on Monday? And they say, well, when the World Bank comes, they don't come back until 3 months' time. We like it that way. And they say, but they also bring consultants. It's not about us doing it. And it's like, this is the story of you. It's not the story of us. Right? So they identify practical ideas, they get to action, and then they stop regularly. In Sri Lanka, we stop every 2 to 3 weeks, and they stop to learn. What did we do? What did we learn? And then how can we adapt into another step? They do this again and again and again and again in multiple iterations so that they can learn how to do the thing. Now, let me give you an example of our work in Sri Lanka. We started there last August. We worked for a few years before that in Albania. I worked before that in Mozambique. So we don't choose easy places to work. And we choose places that are really struggling. And we started with a conversation with ministers in August that went kind of something like this. What's the problem? Growth is slowing. Why is growth slowing? Well, because exports are down, and we don't have FDI. Why are exports down, and why don't you have FDI? Well, because our traditional export sectors are slowing, and we're getting a lot of competition from other countries in those sectors, and they're just cannibalizing us, and we don't have any new export sectors. We haven't been able to do that for a long time. And in FDI, it's just, we can't attract new FDI sources. We haven't been able to do it for a long time. The FDI that's come in the last few years came in and built a whole lot of buildings, and it hasn't really generated any production. So, okay, that's a nice problem. Can you mobilize a team? Sure. When? How about 3 weeks' time? Great. For how long? 6 months. So this happened in August. Then in September, we came back, and we met people who I now know very, very well, about 40 professionals from in the government, people who we had been told months before didn't know their jobs, couldn't mobilize anything, couldn't do anything, and were just really dead wood. Have you heard the term dead wood? It's, I'm a big fan of government, and I think that government is the most underutilized thing in most countries of the world, including the United States. And we got a bunch of government officials, and it's just a wonderful thing. And these guys, the first thing they did is they said, we need to break the problem down even further. So they broke it down into 4 key areas. One, we don't know which sectors to target. So in both exports and in FDI, we can't just have a blanket process of kind of promoting exports, because if we want to get new exports, we need to really understand the industry. We need to understand what's wrong with it, and we don't know which industries to go for. If you want to go after investors, you don't kind of just put a flag up and say, Sri Lanka is open for business. You have to say, what business do we want? Where are the investors? How do we find them? I said, we don't even know what we want. We don't know which industries we should go for. Now, my sense is that I see a colleague from Kazakhstan kind of nodding his head. This is a big issue, right? It's a big issue in Saudi. This is a big issue for a lot of countries, big issue for South Africa. So the second group said, well, even if we knew which sectors to target, we don't even know how to support those sectors. So if we have new exporters in this country, new entrepreneurs who are trying to break into new sectors, we don't even know what to do for them. We know how to work with the garment industry. Why? Because they've been here for 20 or 30 years. We know what they need. We know they're an animal that we're familiar with. But when we think about printed circuit boards, There's 2 companies. Those companies are headed by Japanese guys who decided that Sri Lanka was a great place to be. But we don't really know the industry at all. We don't know them at all. They don't speak our language. We don't really know how to increase their exports from $7 million a year to $40 million a year. Right? The next one said, well, we don't know how to attract new investors, even if we knew the sectors. Our investment strategy at the BOI, the Board of Investment, has been wait for people to come, and when they come, try and jump around as much as you can. Is that a good description, Sujiwa? It is, right? And they've been successful at that in some sectors. But generally, the sectors that you're going to be successful are the ones that are already there. Because the investors are coming because you make garments, and they're thinking, let's come here. But if garments isn't the future, how do you get an investor somewhere else? And they say, we don't know where they are. We don't know how to speak their language. We don't know how to engage them. Another one says, well, we don't even know how to create an attractive investment climate. We've done the doing business indicators thing. We've gone up and down on the doing business indicators, and we haven't really seen that it changes things. Within each group, they then deconstructed their problem even more. So the group that was looking at attracting new investors, they said, we don't know which sectors to target. We don't know where the firms are. We don't know anything about their industries. We don't know how to engage with them. We don't know what incentives they want. We don't know why they're not here in the first place. And it's kind of, this is a great conversation because you'll notice that what we aren't doing is telling them what to do. We're saying to them, understand your problem as the starting point because that is what you own. So these guys did this. And then they also identified actions to take really fast. And we don't say to them, develop a big strategy. We say to them, now you've identified the 3 or 4 or 5 or 40 dimensions of this problem. Which ones can you do something in next week? And again, they say, what do you mean next week? What do you mean us? No, which ones can you start acting on? And what we're trying to do is we're trying to push them into what we call push periods. Now, people who are familiar with agile management theory would recognize that this has something to do with agile, and in agile they call this a sprint. We call it a push because we've never seen anyone in government sprint, and because what we are really doing here is we're pushing. Individuals are pushing themselves to work harder than they have before and to take risks that they have not before. Their authorizers are pushing them in ways that they have not before, right? So we call it the push period. And then we have a check-in 2 weeks later where we ask, what did you do? What did you learn? What else are you struggling with? And what's next? Having the check-in period creates accountability. It gives people a time bound for, we're coming back. And it also creates a period in which they can act so that they can learn. So the aim is to get them acting in a rapid, motivated, accountable way because action creates the basis of learning. If you don't know how to do something, you can't learn it from a book necessarily. You have to try it and you have to see what happens. Learning is the key to putting the knowledge in the brain. Right, Ricardo? So what happened? We've been doing this for about 6 or 7 months. We engage with the teams every 2 to 3 weeks. We engage with the authorizers like Sujiwa as often as we can. And I'm going to give you a brief rundown on what's happening just with one of the teams to show you how the process works. So I actually have 2 teams up there, but I'm going to focus on the investment promotions team. So when we started, as I said, the BOI's investment promotions approach was really, let's fly a flag and say Sri Lanka is a great place to come to. And when people come here, then we'll engage with you and we'll try to get you to come here. They used an elaborate series of incentives to attract people. About the time that we were coming, or within the 6 months, because of an IMF arrangement, all of the incentives were taken away. So the investment promotions team was saying, the way we promote investment is by giving stuff to people. And now we have nothing to give, so what do we do? So he said, well, how about you kind of develop a promotions approach which is about targeting, chasing, wooing, and bringing new people because you've worked so hard to get them that they're saying, how can I not go to this country because these guys are so damn persistent? Where did we learn about this? Well, this is what Singapore did in the 1960s. This is what Costa Rica did to get intel. This is what the Czech Republic did to get companies like Volkswagen, right? When they didn't have enough of their own letters, they said, we're just going to go and find those things as quickly as possible. So we got a team of about 6 or 7 people, headed by the head of the promotions agency. His name is Prazanchith. And they came into the first session, and we said to them, so what's the problem? Why can't you get investors? They said, well, we don't know where to go. We don't know which sectors to target. Even if we knew the sectors to target, we are civil servants. We don't understand those sectors. We don't understand the language of business. So we said, okay, what do you start with on Monday? I said, well, I don't know. So he said, well, how about in the next 2 weeks, you guys go and you choose 3 or 4 sectors that you think you can get an investor in, and you come back and you tell us what was the basis of choosing them. How do we do that? Well, go look at the internet. Go look at the way the World Bank targets. Go look at the way they target. Go look at whatever. Came back in 2 weeks' time, and the team had said, well, we kind of like solar panels. Solar panels for Sri Lanka? I said, yeah, we like solar panels because the biggest consumer of solar panels at the moment is India in the world. And there is a huge drive for solar energy in India. And the solar panels mostly come from China and they come from South Korea. So they're saying, you know, they're shipping these solar panels from China and South Korea and they go right past Sri Lanka to India. Maybe we could get a Chinese firm to come and locate itself here so that then they can sell on to India. Now, maybe that's not a perfect solution, but that's an interesting idea. So they start looking at solar panels. They started looking at solar panels. They started looking at logistics. They started looking at airport hotels and a few other things. And then they said, well, what do we do now? So, I don't know. What do you think is the next step? Well, we need to learn a bit about solar panels. So, okay, why don't you go learn about solar panels? 2 weeks later, came in and they said, well, we've learned a lot about solar panels, but, you know, we don't know how to communicate this thing about solar panels. So we had a workshop and we introduced them to a crazy Belgian who is in Sri Lanka. And this guy said to them, why don't you create a pitch book where you can describe the industry and why Sri Lanka makes sense? So they said, that sounds really good. So 2 weeks later, they have a draft of a pitch book. So they say, well, we have this pitch book that we can give to an investor, but we've never given anything like this to an investor, so we don't know how that's going to work. So we said, well, Priyan Fernando and his friends are in a board, and they are all in the private sector. They work in really big firms that invest all the time. Why don't you pitch it to them? So you have these civil servants going in front of the titans of Sri Lankan business and pitching a pitch book that they know nothing about. And the titans of business say, you know what your problem is? Your problem is that you've never been in a factory that makes solar panels. You don't know the industry. So what do? Next 2 weeks, find a factory that makes solar panels. So a couple of them went off and they went and visited this factory that made solar panels. And they came back with solar panels in their hands, so excited. And they said, you know, these guys are interested. They say that we have the right raw materials. They say this, this, and this. But they also told us that they would need land that has access to water. And we have a problem with that in Sri Lanka. So they came back saying, there's a whole lot of positives we learned, and then there's a whole lot of negatives too. But that's good. Let's keep moving. So they said, well, this is great now. We have the pitch book. We know what's wrong with the pitch book. We've learned about the sector. But now we need to pitch to solar panel companies. We don't know where they are. Okay, why don't you go and find out where they are? Oh, okay. So they went and identified who are the biggest solar panel manufacturers in the world, and they came back 2 weeks later with a list of the top 100 manufacturers. A lot of them are in China, a lot of them are South Korea. Now, I'm just telling you about solar panels. They're doing it in 4 other sectors at the same time, right? And they come up with this list. And then the team says, here's the list, here's all these contacts. Now, how do we engage with these people? So he said, well, how would you engage with them? How would you find them? Let's make a list of all the ways that you might run into them. So they said, well, maybe they're going to come to the country. Great, let's see. Whenever there's a Chinese delegation in town, you go to the Chinese delegation and say, is anybody from any of these companies? Maybe we could speak with our economic attachés in the embassies. Great. Maybe we could speak with people in the diaspora. Great. Let's get lists of names. Let's start talking to them. So they start to do this. And the next time we went back, and this was about the middle of December, the lady on the team called Ganga was tremendously excited. I said, what happened, Ganga? And she said, well, there was a Chinese delegation in town. And because we had identified that whenever there was a Chinese delegation, we would go and hound them and ask them if anyone was from the firm, that's precisely what I did. Someone put their hand up. And she said, I got to take him back to my office. I got to show him the pitch book. And now we have an engagement with the number 2 Chinese firm producing solar panels. So over the next 3 or 4 months, they carried on doing this kind of work and dealing with a lot of problems in government and stepping aside sometimes to build their authorization. They've managed to bring their work in front of the Prime Minister's office, in front of their Minister's office. They are actively pursuing firms. At the moment, they have a visit in 2 weeks' time from the top British solar panel manufacturing firm coming to Sri Lanka. They've had 2 visits from Chinese and South Korean firms, and every single visit is new learning, right? Now they've moved past solar panels. They're now looking at autos, auto parts. They're looking at medical instruments. They're looking at screws and bolts and washers. And when you get into this world, you'll find that, you know, the granularity of trade is very specific. But the point here is that they are mobilized, they're learning, and they are producing. In this industry, there's a rule of 300, 30, 10, and 1. 300 calls, 30 get responses, 10 lead to leads, 3 lead to serious conversations, and 1 actually invests. At the moment, they're at about number 80 on their calls. Now, we started in September. If we carry on like this and if the numbers hold, then they are going to get an FDI deal sometime in January, February next year. Now, people say, well, that sounds slow. Hey, they've never got one before. It's never happened. And this is not us, and this is not McKinsey, and this is not the World Bank. This is Ganga. And what's happening with Ganga is that once she gets that deal, she's going to go get more. And that is how you go from 0 to 157. You build the capability of us to do the thing we need to solve the problem. And then they can solve the problem again and again and again. So I have to say something people say, what's the counterfactual? How do you know that this really works? Well, there's another team that was working on a targeting mechanism that essentially started off saying, we don't know how to target. We don't know how to choose which sectors to go after. So we said to them, okay, let's do it. By January, following exactly the same process, they had a targeting mechanism with over 100 pieces of data where they had 3 different criteria. What would the value of a sector be for Sri Lanka? What's the market demand and investor interest in the sector? And then what's the strength of Sri Lanka today? And that's probably the most elaborate model that I've seen, and they are informing all sorts of people about this. At exactly the same time, the World Bank was developing a targeting mechanism on behalf of the government of Sri Lanka. They came in January, a month after the team that developed this, with a targeting model that has no data, that is essentially focused on sectors that Sri Lanka already has, and that, most importantly, has not involved 1 second of time from anybody physically in Sri Lanka. It was developed in Washington. So these guys were faster, they were better quality, and everything that they have is theirs. The team that I described with the investment promotions, when we started the work in September, we started 2 months after the World Bank began a private sector development project with $100 million. And that team, one of the things they were focused on was investment promotions. While our guys are developing these capabilities and are out there speaking to firms and are out there making the calls that are needed, the World Bank was developing a strategy for Sri Lanka to do better on investment promotions, and I think they delivered it last month. And their idea is hire 50, 60, 70 more people to do this. My experience is that hiring people takes a good few years in every government. And then what are they going to do? Who's going to train them? So I look at the work that these guys are doing, and I'm like, these guys are going to train them. And if they weren't here, nobody would be there to do that. So, why should you consider this? A lot of countries are looking for the solution. And they're thinking that the fastest way to develop is to take someone else's idea from some other country and to just ram it into your system. A lot of countries are also saying, let's bypass government, because government doesn't have the letters and they certainly can't write the words. They are there. They have capabilities. You need to work with them. See, the thing is that if your country is facing a complex problem, where you actually don't know what to do, and where you actually have to take a lot of risk to get there, then you need a process that allows you to learn as you go. Exactly what Arby was saying. You can't pretend that someone else gives you the answer because they're not you. They don't know your politics. They don't know the story of us in your place. They don't know what capabilities you have. What you need is a process that allows you to learn as you do so that you build the capabilities and the solutions at the same time. That's kind of what PDIA is. That's why we work with it. And that's why I was excited to share it with you today. I hope the story was interesting and granular enough. We are being very true to our boring name, and we are writing our stories up. But every article that we write is about 60 or 70 pages long, and basically says on day 1 they did this, on day 2 they did this, on day 3 they did this. And even my team is saying to me, this is really dry and really pedestrian. And what I'm saying to them is, it's time that people realized how things get done, that it is step by step, by step by step, by step by step, learning, putting the brains in the head, trying the brains out, adapting again and again. Right, Miguel? So thank you very much, everybody.